Good afternoon, beautiful people. Today we are diving into a jaw-dropping development in the justice world. The motion by Letitia James and James Comey to disqualify Lindsey Halligan from the prosecutions against them and the broader implications for rule of law and political prosecutions. If you believe, as I do, that our justice system should operate fairly, impartially, and without political weaponization, then you are going to want to hear this. Let's begin. Welcome to Nellie Miranda.
Lawyers for Letitia James now telling the court they're teaming up with James Comey in an event to get both of their criminal cases thrown out, combining motions to disqualify President Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney in the case, arguing that her appointment was illegal. And the new duo of James and James could expand soon, or maybe if and when the Trump Justice Department moves forward with other cases against some of the president's high-profile critics.
As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Okay, so let's set the stage. On one side, we have Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, charged with mortgage fraud for alleged misrepresentation of her intention to live in a Virginia home. On the other side, we have James Comey, former FBI director, indicted for alleged false statements and obstruction in his 2020 testimony. Then enter in Lindsey Halligan, appointed by President Trump as interim U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia to handle these prosecutions. Now, it is worth noting Halligan had no prior prosecutorial experience, and that is one of the points that the left really wants to drive home. They want to paint her as unqualified, handpicked by Trump, and completely out of her depth. But let's be honest, when was the last time the mainstream media raised the same concern about political appointees on their side? Exactly. It's nothing but selective outrage. But let's continue. Then comes the motion. Both James and Comey argue Halligan's appointment is invalid. Her involvement taints the indictments and that they were essentially set up by partisan enforcement.
Caitlin, let's walk through Letitia James' arraignment today and what happens next with her.
Well, Casey, she pleaded not guilty. The court hearing ended. They set a trial date. It's going to be in January, so only 3 months from now. But things got off so fast to start that we've already seen an argument on paper from Letitia James's defense team. It's that argument going up against Lindsey Halligan, the U.S. attorney, saying she doesn't have the authority to prosecute this case. The same argument that James Comey is going to be making and already is making in his own case in the same district. I'm going to read a little bit from this. Ms. Halligan, Lindsey Halligan, the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, lacked the power to present this case to the grand jury or sign this indictment, and she cannot continue to supervise this prosecution. They also write, this court must reject the executive brazen attempt to sidestep the constitutional and statutory limitations on the appointment of U.S. attorneys. So essentially what they're arguing and what we're going to hear at a hearing in 3 weeks where James's defense team and the other James Comey, his defense team, will be arguing this same thing. They're saying that Lindsey Halligan was appointed to this position too far into an administration to not have someone confirmed by the U.S. Senate into that post, that this is Donald Trump run amok, running the Justice Department as the president, and that also she wasn't someone that was coming from inside the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Justice Department to become the U.S. Attorney and prosecute this case, take it through the grand jury. That's the first big battle. The next big battle, though, will be Letitia James's attorneys arguing another very similar thing to what James Comey's team will be arguing, that Donald Trump has launched a revenge tour against them. They're going to argue that their cases, both of them separately, they'll argue that their cases should be dismissed because the prosecutors shouldn't have brought them to begin with, that it was a constitutional violation and that they were vindictively sought out, that the Justice Department was weaponized. So we're going to hear that over and over again, but not too many times over because this case is moving so fast and the trial date is not far away at all.
So both James and Comey filed a joint motion to disqualify Halligan, arguing her appointment violated DOJ protocol and tainted the indictments from day one. They allege that she personally presented the case to the grand jury, an unusual step for any U.S. attorney, and that her involvement created a structural defect. The DOJ, meanwhile, insists that her appointment was lawful and ratified, but as the Washington Examiner points out, Even the judge in the case rebuked prosecutors for what he called an indict first, investigate later approach. Now, let's talk about the fallout. According to ABC News and The Hill, a watchdog group called Campaign for Accountability has filed bar complaints against Halligan in Florida and Virginia. The complaints accuse her of abuse of power, arguing that she used her office to target political enemies without probable cause. The Hill's coverage puts it this way. The group alleges that Halligan's cases lacked factual foundation and were pursued for political purposes, a clear violation of ethical standards. They're also calling for disciplinary action and potential disbarment. That's right, they don't just want her off the case, they want her law license and sanity. The Campaign for Accountability goes so far as to claim that Trump handpicked her to weaponize justice against critics of his administration. Again, this is coming from a left-leaning group that has filed multiple complaints against conservative officials over the years. But ask yourself, where were these watchdogs when Letitia James literally campaigned on going after Trump before she even took office? Silence, crickets, nobody said anything. So the optics are messy. You got left screaming that the Trump DOJ is doing exactly what they themselves have done.
Ken, let me come back to you because meanwhile, there's some developments in the James Comey case. His defense lawyers just filed a brief arguing that the government's evidence against Comey is, quote, tainted. What's their argument here? What kind of response has the judge provided so far?
There are a couple of angles here, Anna. One is that they are suggesting that an FBI agent may have gotten access to privileged communications between Comey and his lawyers, and that may have bled in front of this grand jury, which would be improper. But they're also saying that Lindsey Halligan may have sort of essentially kept the grand jury captive in a room until they returned an indictment. They revealed that initially when she presented the case, they returned a no bill. They declined to indict, and she kept them there all afternoon and then finally secured an indictment by 2 votes. And this is exactly why they are trying to obtain the transcripts and recordings of exactly what Lindsey Halligan said to that grand jury, Anna.
Rebecca, your reaction?
Yeah, well, I mean, grand juries are normally secret, and I think that this is, this reporting, if accurate, is certainly a reason why the judge would want to take a look at what happened within that grand jury, because it is potentially extremely troubling and could, if true, lead to the dismissal of that indictment.
Okay.
The left's talking point right now is clear that Halligan is inexperienced, unqualified, she's a beauty queen, she's motivated by revenge, so on and so forth. But here's the thing, many on the right see this as poetic justice, because for years, people like Comey and James have been accused of using their positions to target conservatives and President Donald Trump himself. And now that the tables have turned, it's, how dare they try to weaponize the Justice Department against me? I am Letitia James, fighting for your rights, and I'm James Comey. But this story is not just about Halligan or Comey or James. It's about whether America can ever get back to a justice system that's actually blind again. But here's former FBI agent Nicole Parker, who says that it is time for James Comey to finally face the consequences of his actions.
Comey changed the game, and I would tell you that on July 5th of 2016, when he got out on that press conference and he stood before the American people and said that no reasonable prosecutor would charge Hillary Clinton, and then made this prosecutorial decision, which was completely inappropriate, out of his lane, that's at the moment that I knew that the FBI had been politically weaponized. We had become a pawn, and it was wrong, and it just continued to ramp up. Again, that's back in 2016. And what's really fascinating is when I wrote this book, I had the whole Jim Comey chapter, because to me, it was a defining moment. And I thought, that's a little dated. Maybe we should take it out. Nothing's ever happened to him. But lo and behold, here we are, and everything is coming to fruition. And everything that I knew was happening at the FBI, it was happening, and I am completely validated. It is disgusting, it is despicable, and it is wrong.
Well, I mean, you're right. A judge will soon review the grand jury materials in the case against Jim Comey. They want to determine whether or not to give those materials to Comey's legal team. The judge is urging DOJ prosecutors last week to do that, to give the materials over. The prosecutors appealed and suggested that the judge look over the materials first himself. Comey is pushing to get this case dismissed altogether. He's facing 2 federal counts of making false statements to Congress and obstruction of a criminal proceeding. We know that he has pled not guilty here. But, Nicole, he wants the whole case dismissed.
You know what? He's very, very all about putting everything onto everybody else. But when it comes back to himself, he wants no responsibility or accountability. And you know what, James Comey? Those days are over. As an FBI agent, I talk about the two FBIs. FBI 1 were the good, honorable agents trying to do good work. FBI 2 was the FBI that was politically and socially weaponized, like James Comey. And you know what? There's nothing more that FBI 1 would like to see than full accountability for James Comey, because he single-handedly started the downfall and the entire destruction of the FBI, and he needs to be held accountable. He needs to face real consequences because he ruined our entire reputation.
We need to see this through to the end, because if we don't, it will only reinforce the idea that our system runs on double standards, one for the elites and one for everyone else. But back to their motion. The Hill reports that this motion is expected to trigger a full hearing on Halligan's role and authority. If she is disqualified, her indictments against both James and Comey could collapse. But think about that. Months of investigations, millions of dollars in taxpayer funded would essentially be wasted. But if the motion fails and Halligan stays on, which I think she should, it could set a precedent that future administrations can appoint loyalists to go after their opponents under the guise of justice. Either way, I think this case will shape how political power intersects with law enforcement for years to come. What do you think? Should Lindsey Halligan be disqualified, or should Letitia James and James Comey face their day in court like anyone else? And do you think that the entire system has become too political to save? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. And tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.